we have scraped the bedrock of the military archives to bring you this definitive chronicle. This is the final frontier of vertical flight, featuring machines that defy the very laws of physics. From secret stealth ghosts to massive tank-lifting cranes, we are covering the icons of the sky. This is the absolute physics-defying roster of the American rotary wing fleet and its evolution. Our journey begins at the genesis point with the legendary Sikorsky VS-2300 in the year 1939. Igor Sikorsky donned a fedora and strapped himself into a shaky, skeletal metal frame to fly. It was a tethered experiment that looked like a death trap, but it proved a vital concept. It showed that a single main rotor with a tail rotor was the only stable way to conquer air. Without this specific machine, the world of modern aviation as we know it simply does not exist. Before the true helicopter arrived, the Kellett KD-1 Autogiro served as the military's grandfather. It featured a rotor that spun freely in the wind like a pinwheel, unable to hover perfectly. However, it gave the Army its first taste of short takeoff capabilities and paved the way forward. In 1942, the world witnessed the birth of the R-4 Hoverfly, the first mass-produced helicopter. It looked like a steel cage wrapped in thin fabric and was notoriously underpowered in flight. Yet it proved a machine could hover in combat, saving the first lives in military history. It extracted wounded soldiers from dense Burmese jungles where traditional planes could never land. The Sikorsky R-5 Dragonfly arrived as a major upgrade to the R-4 with a larger fuselage. This machine featured a distinct tandem cockpit and showed the real potential for utility work. It became famous for rescuing pilots from flooded rivers using external stretchers on the hull. The Dragonfly proved that the helicopter was more than a toy, was a vital tool of mercy. The Sikorsky R-6 Hoverfly II was a refined, streamlined version of the original R-4 design. It featured a glass cockpit and a more powerful engine for improved performance in the field. Hundreds were built for World War II, but they were quickly overshadowed by the workhorse R-5. They remain a forgotten bridge between early experiments and the true utility birds of the future. Built by a tire company in 1946, the Firestone XR9 was known as the rubber chopper. It was a tiny, sleek tandem-seater, affectionately called the Rosicle by those who flew it. While it flew incredibly smoothly with excellent controls, the Army chose dedicated aviation firms. Firestone went back to making tires, leaving this sleek prototype as a rare piece of history. The Kellett XR8 was known as the Egg Beater and featured a very strange rotor design. Its blades crossed each other like scissors, which eliminated the need for a traditional tail rotor. While it was unstable and weird to look at, it proved a concept of intermeshing rotors. This design would eventually be perfected by Cayman to create some of the world's best lifters. The Kellett XR10 was a massive twin-engine transport built in 1947, known as the Behemoth. It looked like a flying bus with egg-beater rotors and was the largest helicopter of its time. Tragedy struck during a test flight when two blades collided in mid-air, causing a fatal crash. The catastrophic failure ended the program immediately, serving as a dark lesson in rotor sync. The Landgraf H-2 was a rare 1944 prototype that featured rotors made entirely of wood. It had retractable landing gear, which was unheard of at the time, and a very sleek profile. Instead of normal controls, it used complex ailerons on the rotor blades to change direction. It was quiet and sophisticated, but far too complex for the military to mass-produce during war. Built in Kansas, the Sybil YH-24 Skyhawk looked more like a flying bread box than an aircraft. The Army bought 2 units to test the concept of a cheap, disposable utility helicopter for troops. It was ugly, slow, and underpowered, proving the old adage that you get exactly what you pay for. The Skyhawk disappeared quickly, but it paved the way for more robust workhorse designs later on. Now, we enter the era of the workhorses, starting with the iconic Bell H-13 Sioux helicopter. Famous for its role in the show MASH, it featured a bubble canopy and a simple tail boom. It became the ultimate symbol of the Korean War, saving thousands of lives through medevac. Soldiers were carried on external stretchers, exposed to the freezing wind and the rotor wash. The Bell H-13J Ranger was a presidential pioneer that changed VIP transport forever in America. While many think of the Sea King, Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first president to fly a chopper. This modified Bell 47 featured a comfortable and closed cabin for the leader of the free world. It landed on the White House lawn in 1957, proving helicopters were safe for the highest office. The Hiller OH-23 Raven was the primary trainer for the United States Army throughout the 1950s. It featured a wider cabin than the Bell H-13, a unique paddle rotor system for stability. This machine trained thousands of pilots who would later fly dangerous missions in the Korean War, though often overshadowed. The Raven was the foundation of the Army's rotary wing pilot corps. The H-21 Shawnee was famously nicknamed the Flying Banana due to its distinct bent fuselage. This shape kept the rear rotors high above the ground, allowing for safe loading in rough terrain. It was the first successful tandem rotor cargo helicopter capable of landing in deep snow or swamps. It delivered troops to locations where no other vehicle on Earth could possibly hope to reach. The Sikorsky H-19 Chickasaw was the first true transport helicopter to change the tactical landscape. By placing the engine in the nose like a truck, it left the main cabin open for heavy cargo. It revolutionized air assault tactics in Korea by landing entire squads behind enemy lines in seconds. The H-19 was the machine that proved helicopters could carry the weight of a modern infantry. The Sikorsky H-34 Choctaw was the last and greatest of the piston-engined helicopters in the fleet. It looked like a hunchback with a massive nose housing a loud, powerful, radial piston engine. It served as the primary troop transport for the Marines in the early years of the Vietnam War. Eventually, it was replaced by turbine engines, but its rugged legacy remains unmatched in history. The CH-37 Mojave, known as the Deuce, was a massive, ugly twin-engine piston-driven beast. It featured two huge radial engines housed in pods on the sides of the large metal fuselage. In the 1950s, this was the heavy lifter of choice before modern turbine engines were invented. It was primarily used to recover crashed aircraft and heavy equipment from the field of battle. The Sikorsky HR-2S1 was the Marine Corps version of the Mojave, designed for heavy assault. It featured unique clamshell doors in the nose, allowing vehicles to drive directly into the bay. A Jeep or a 105mm howitzer could be loaded quickly, making it a true heavy-lift pioneer. This was the first machine to give the Marines real heavy-duty vertical lift capability. The Cayman H-43 Husky was a strange-looking rescue helicopter with intermeshing egg-beater rotors. The Air Force used it for crash rescues, hovering directly over burning jet aircraft on the runway. Its powerful rotor wash would blow flames away from the cockpit so pilots could escape the fire. The Husky saved countless pilots from certain death, acting as a flying fire extinguisher in the sky. The UH-1 Iroquois, better known as the Huey, is the single most iconic helicopter in history. The distinct hump of its two-blade rotor defined the entire era of the Vietnam War. It served as a troop transport, gunship, and a medevac, all in one incredibly rugged package. The Huey was the cavalry horse of the 20th century and remains a legend of aviation design. The UH-1N twin Huey was a vital upgrade demanded by the Marines and the Air Force for safety. While the original Huey had one engine, the twin Huey featured a flat nose and two engines. If one engine failed over a forest or ocean, the second engine kept the crew from crashing. It guarded nuclear missile silos for decades and bridged the gap into the modern turbine era. The AH-1 Cobra, known as the Snake, was the world's first dedicated attack helicopter built. It was born from the need to protect Hueys, using the same engine but a much slimmer body. At only 38 inches wide, it was a small target, armed with stub wings for rockets and guns. It was fast, mean, and notoriously difficult for enemy ground troops to hit during a strike. The OH-6 Cayuse, nicknamed the Loach, was a tiny, teardrop-shaped scout helicopter of the war. It was incredibly agile and fast, used to fly at treetop level to troll for enemy fire. When the enemy shot at the Loach, the waiting Cobras would swoop in and destroy the target. The Loach pilots were some of the bravest in history, acting as live bait for the gunships. The OH-58 Kiowa served alongside the Loach as a scout, starting as a militarized jet ranger. Over the years, it evolved into the Kiowa Warrior, armed with powerful Hellfire missiles. It featured a mast-mounted sight above the rotors, allowing it to peek over trees while hiding. This allowed the Kiowa to scout enemy positions without ever exposing the main body of the craft. The CH-47 Chinook is a twin-rotor heavy lifter that is still in active service after decades. Its tandem rotor design puts all engine power toward lift, allowing it to carry massive loads. It is the backbone of Army logistics, capable of transporting artillery and vehicles with ease. Despite its massive size, the Chinook is famously fast and highly maneuverable in tight spots. The CH-46 Sea Knight, known as the Frog, was the Marine Corps tandem rotor transport bird. Smaller than the Chinook, it was designed specifically to fit on the decks of Navy ships. It served as the primary assault transport for Marines for decades of sea-based operations. The Frog was a reliable partner for ship-to-shore movements and vertical replenishment at sea. The CH-53 Sea Stallion is a massive heavy-lift helicopter built specifically for the Marines. It features 6 blades and engines that roar like a jet, capable of lifting heavy trucks. It was designed to haul down aircraft and heavy equipment across long distances with ease. The Stallion remains one of the most powerful and intimidating sights in the American fleet. The CH-54 Tarhe, or Sky Crane, is a helicopter with no cargo bay, just a spine and engines. It was designed to straddle heavy loads like tanks or containers and fly them to the front. It looks like a giant mechanical insect and is the strongest lifter of its particular era. The Sky Crane proved that a helicopter didn't need a cabin to be incredibly useful in war. The UH-60 Blackhawk is the definitive utility helicopter of the modern age of warfare. Designed to replace the aging Huey, it is faster, stronger, and much more crash-worthy for crews. It serves every role imaginable, from air assaults to medical evacuations and VIP transport. The Black Hawk is the universal symbol of modern American military power across the globe. The AH-64 Apache is arguably the most advanced attack helicopter ever produced in history. It carries a 30mm chain gun linked to the pilot's helmet. Where he looks, the gun points. Built to stop a massive Soviet tank invasion, it is now the premier hunter-killer of the sky. Its sensors allow it to find and destroy targets in pitch-black darkness or thick battlefield smoke. The MH-6 Little Bird, known as the Killer Egg, is used by the elite 160th Night Stalkers. It is small enough to land on a street corner or a roof in the middle of a city. Special operators ride on external planks, ready to jump off and fight at a moment's notice. The Little Bird is the ultimate tool for precision urban warfare and special operations raids. The MH-6 LDAP is a Black Hawk gunship that thinks it is a dedicated Apache attack bird. Used by special forces, It carries no troops and is instead loaded with cannons and rockets. It provides heavy fire support for special ops raids, carrying Hellfire missiles into the fray. It combines the durability of the Black Hawk with the teeth of a heavy-duty aerial predator. The MH-53 Pavlo was the most technologically advanced helicopter of the Cold War era. Packed with terrain-following radar and armor, it flew deep behind enemy lines in total darkness. It was designed for special forces missions in bad weather where no other pilot would dare fly. The Pavlo was a massive, complex machine that owned the night for American special ops. The stealth Black Hawk, or Silent Hawk, remains a highly classified mystery to the public. It was used in the famous raid to kill Osama bin Laden and featured sharp radar-evading angles. Special coatings and noise-dampening technology allowed it to slip past enemy air defenses. It has never been officially revealed, leaving its true design to the world of military legend. The UH-7 Lakota is the Army's primary light utility helicopter for domestic operations today. You will see it responding to hurricanes or patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border for the Guard. It has no heavy guns, as it was designed purely for logistics, medical use, and surveillance. The Lakota is a cost-effective solution for missions that don't require a heavy Black Hawk. The MH-139 Grey Wolf is the Air Force's new guardian for the vast nuclear missile fields. It patrols the silos of Montana and North Dakota, designed to deploy security teams quickly. It is fast and quiet, ensuring that America's nuclear deterrent remains protected at all times. The Grey Wolf represents a modern shift toward high-speed security for critical infrastructure. The Bell 412 Sentinel is a modern four-blade version of the legendary Huey helicopter design. While mostly a civilian bird, the U.S. military uses it for special security in South America. It is essentially the Huey that went to private school, featuring modern tech and reliability.
Oh.
The Sentinel continues the legacy of the Bell utility line with updated performance stats. The Bell 429 Global Ranger is used by the Department of Energy for nuclear incident response. These dark painted helicopters are on standby to transport specialized teams across the country. They are fast and agile, designed for rapid reaction to any domestic nuclear emergency. The Global Ranger is a silent guardian, rarely seen by the public but always ready to fly. Now we look at the sea with the HH-52A Sea Guard, the first turbine-powered amphibious bird. It looked like a hunchback whale and was capable of landing directly in high ocean waves. The Sea Guard saved over 15,000 lives by plucking sailors directly from the water's surface. It proved that helicopters were the ultimate tool for Coast Guard search and rescue missions. The SH-3 Sea King is a famous boat hull helicopter used to recover Apollo astronauts. While famous for space recovery, its main job was hunting Soviet submarines in the deep. It used dipping sonar and torpedoes to protect American carrier groups during the Cold War. The Sea King was a versatile giant that served the Navy and the President with great honor. The HH-3 Jolly Green Giant was a modified Sea King used for combat search and rescue. Heavily armored and armed, it flew deep into Vietnam to pick up downed American pilots. Its green camouflage paint gave it its famous name as it hovered over the jungle canopy. The Jolly Green Giant was a beacon of hope for any pilot stuck behind enemy lines. The SH-2C Sprite was a compact naval helicopter designed for the small decks of frigates. It was packed with sensors and torpedoes, acting as the long eyes of the ship's captain. It could hunt submarines over the horizon, extending the lethal reach of the surface fleet. The Sea Sprite was a miracle of packaging, fitting huge capability into a very small frame. The HH-65 Dolphin is the iconic orange helicopter of the United States Coast Guard today. It features a unique Finestrin tail rotor, which is a fan protected inside the tail fin. It is famous for saving sailors from hurricanes and rough seas under impossible conditions. The dolphin is a common sight along the coast, representing safety for all who go to sea. The MH-68 Stingray was a specialized, agile helicopter used by the Coast Guard's Hitron unit. It carried a sniper who was authorized to shoot out the engines of drug-running boats. This high-speed pursuit bird stopped cartels in their tracks across the Caribbean Sea. The Stingray was a precision instrument in the war on drugs, fast and incredibly lethal. The HH-60 Jayhawk is the Coast Guard's long-range rescue version of the Black Hawk airframe. It carries massive external fuel tanks to fly hundreds of miles offshore into the deep ocean. The Jayhawk is built to survive the worst weather imaginable while saving sinking ships. It is the gold standard for long-range maritime search and rescue in the modern world. The MH-53E Sea Dragon is the massive minesweeper and the heaviest helicopter in the West. Its job is to drag a massive sled through the ocean to detonate hidden naval mines. It is heavier and stronger than a standard Stallion, built for incredible low-altitude tension. The Sea Dragon keeps the shipping lanes safe by clearing the path for the entire Navy. The S-61 RHH-3F Pelican was the Coast Guard's heavy amphibian before the Jayhawk arrived. It featured a rear ramp for easy loading and a watertight hull for landing on the waves. It served as the heavy lifter of the seas for 40 years, performing massive rescue missions. The Pelican was a beloved workhorse that could carry large groups of survivors to safety. Now we enter the realm of weird science, starting with the massive Hughes XH-17 monster. Built by Howard Hughes, it featured the largest rotor system ever flown at 130 feet wide. It used jet engines on the tips of the blades to spin the rotor without a gearbox. It was incredibly loud and inefficient, but it proved the heavy-lift crane concept worked. The Boeing XH-62 Goliath was designed in the 1970s as the ultimate heavy-lift helicopter. It featured 3 massive engines and was designed to lift twice what a Chinook could carry. The program was canceled just months before its first flight due to massive budget cuts. Today, it sits as a rusted frame in a museum, a what-if of aviation engineering history. The Pisetsky YH-16 transporter was a massive 1950s tandem rotor bird, like a flying liner. It was 77 feet long and intended to carry 40 fully equipped troops into battle zones. During a test flight, a rotor shaft failed, causing the massive craft to break apart. The crash killed the crew and ended the dream of giant piston-powered supertransports. The Hiller YH-32 Hornet was one of the strangest helicopters ever built for the military. It had no internal engine. Instead, it used ramjets mounted on the tips of the blades. At night, the rotors spun with a brilliant ring of fire that was visible for many miles. It was simple and light, but it burned fuel so fast it could only fly for 20 minutes. The McDonnell XH-20 Little Henry looked like a simple steel park bench with a rotor. Like the Hornet, it was powered by small ramjets on the blade tips and spit fire. It was the Air Force's attempt to build a flying motorcycle for every single soldier. The noise and the extreme fuel consumption made it completely impractical for real combat use. The XH-26 Jet Jeep was a tiny one-man helicopter that could be folded into a box. It was designed to be dropped by parachute, 2 downed pilots behind enemy lines for escape. It could be assembled in 20 minutes and fly on gasoline, kerosene, or even whiskey. While a genius design, the pulse jet engines were too loud for a secret escape mission. The Piasecki VZ-8 Air Jeep was the Army's attempt to create a literal jeep that could fly. It was a flat platform with 2 horizontal fans that could drive or fly over rivers. It worked surprisingly well, but the Army decided helicopters were simply more efficient. The Air Jeep remains a fascinating relic of the era when we thought cars would fly. The Lackner HZ-1 Aerocycle was perhaps the most dangerous aircraft ever tested by man. A soldier stood on a platform with a lawnmower engine and rotors spinning under his feet. The army realized that if a soldier slipped, he would fall into the spinning blades. It was quickly abandoned before it could turn any more test pilots into mincemeat. The Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee was a flying trash can where the pilot stood inside a duct. It used kinesthetic control, meaning the pilot steered by simply leaning his body weight. Oh, it actually worked. It was slow and made the pilot an easy target for snipers. The Pawnee proved that leaning to steer was possible, but not practical for a war zone. The Avro Canada VZ-9 Avrocar was a literal flying saucer built by the U.S. military. It used a central turbo rotor to create a cushion of air for a vertical takeoff. It was supposed to be a supersonic fighter, but it only wobbled 3 feet off the ground. The project became a famous failure, proving that saucer shapes aren't great for flight. The Sikorsky Cypher was a 1990s drone that looked like a giant floating donut in the air. Its shrouded rotor allowed it to bounce off walls or fly down narrow city streets safely. It was a pioneer in urban drone warfare, leading to the sophisticated drones we use today. The Cypher proved that protecting the rotors was the key to flying in tight urban spaces. The Boeing X-50 Dragonfly was a DARPA project that attempted to defy the laws of physics. It took off using a rotor, but once in flight, the rotor would stop and lock. The stopped rotor then became a fixed wing, allowing the craft to fly like a jet. It proved that stopped rotor flight was possible, even if it was mechanically difficult. The LTV XC-142 was a massive four-engine transport that tilted its entire wing to hover. It actually flew and carried troops, but the mechanical complexity was a total nightmare. The gears required to tilt a massive wing made it impossible to maintain in the field. The project was scrapped, but it provided the data needed for future tiltrotor designs. The V-22 Osprey is the transformer of the sky, taking off like a chopper and flying like a jet. It combines the speed of a plane with the landing capability of a traditional helicopter. Despite a very troubled development, it revolutionized the range of Marine Corps assaults. It can land troops hundreds of miles further than any helicopter that came before it. The AH-56. Cheyenne was a failed dream of a high-speed attack helicopter from the 1960s. It featured a pusher propeller on the tail that allowed it to fly at 240 miles per hour. It was incredibly advanced but proved too complex and dangerous for the technology of the time. The program was canceled in favor of the Apache, which was much more reliable for combat. The Sikorsky XH-59 was a futuristic prototype with 2 rotors spinning in opposite directions. By using coaxial rotors and jet engines, it eliminated the need for a tail rotor. It proved that this design was the key to achieving high-speed flight in a helicopter. This research laid the groundwork for the modern supercopters being developed today. The Sikorsky S-72 X-Wing was a hybrid craft used by NASA and the Army for research. It could lock its rotors in place to act as wings, allowing for high-speed jet flight. It provided crucial data on how rotor blades behave when they are pushed to the limit. The X-Wing was a laboratory in the sky, helping engineers dream of faster vertical flight. The Bell 15-3 was the grandfather of the tiltrotor, a shaky experiment from the 1950s. It featured engines on the tips of long wings that could tilt from vertical to horizontal. While it vibrated violently and was scary to fly, it proved the concept was physically possible. Without the 15-3, the modern Osprey and Valor would never have been built. The Bell 15-15 was the father of the Osprey and a massive success story for tiltrotors. It was small, agile, and reliable, dazzling crowds at air shows with its transformations. It proved that tiltrotors could be safe, practical, and efficient for military use. The 1515's performance convinced the military to go all-in on tiltrotor technology. The Sikorsky X-2 was a record breaker that shattered the traditional speed limits of helicopters. In 2010, it flew at 290 miles per hour using a coaxial rotor and a pusher propeller. It signaled the end of the slow helicopter era and the start of a new high-speed age. The X-2 proved that helicopters could finally compete with planes in terms of pure speed. The V-280 Valor is the sleek new tiltrotor chosen to replace the aging Black Hawk fleet. Unlike the Osprey, only the rotor gearboxes tilt, which makes it much more mechanically simple. It promises to double the speed and range of the Army's air assault forces in the future. The Valor represents the next generation of American vertical dominance in the sky. The SB-1 Defiant was the coaxial contender that fought the Valor for the Army contract. It demonstrated incredible stability and speed using a rigid rotor and a pusher prop, though it lost the competition. This technology will likely influence future helicopter designs. The Defiant showed that coaxial rotors are a viable path for heavy, high-speed lift. The Raider X and Invictus were high-speed scouts designed to replace the retired Kiowa. They were fast, stealthy, and lethal, designed for the modern electronic battlefield. The program was canceled in 2024 due to budget shifts, but the tech isn't lost. Their innovations in stealth and speed will define the next generation of rotary flight. The Bell YH-63 was the attack helicopter that famously lost the competition to the Apache. It featured tricycle landing gear and a cockpit where the pilot sat in the front seat. It crashed during testing and lacked the survivability features that the Army demanded. It was sent to the scrapyard of history, while the Apache went on to become a legend. The Boeing Vertol YUH-61 was the sleek runner-up to the legendary Black Hawk helicopter. It was faster and used composite rotors, but the cabin was slightly too small for troops. That lack of internal space cost it the contract, and only a few prototypes were built. It remains a what-if of aviation, a very capable machine that was just slightly off target. The Sikorsky 6-7 Blackhawk was a sleek, winged attack helicopter from the early 1970s. Not to be confused with the UH-60, this bird could perform loops and rolls with ease. It was designed to carry troops while also acting as a heavy-duty gunship for the Army. A fatal crash at an air show ended the program, but its speed was truly revolutionary. The VH-71 Kestrel was a $3 billion mistake, intended to be the new Marine one, based on a European design. The costs ballooned as the Navy added too many requirements. The program was eventually canceled, and the brand new aircraft were sold for spare parts. It serves as a warning about how complex requirements can kill a great aircraft project. The U.S. military secretly operates Soviet Mi-17s and Mi-17 HIPs for training purposes. Acquired from defectors or captured in combat, they are flown by mysterious test squadrons. They allow American pilots to practice against the technology used by our global rivals. These Red Air helicopters are essential for keeping our combat pilots sharp and ready. The Flettner FL-282 Colibri was a Nazi prize captured by the Americans in 1945. Its intermeshing rotors taught American engineers how to build stable, tail-rotor-less ships. Its DNA lives on in the modern Cayman helicopters used for heavy lifting today. It was far more advanced than anything the Allies had during the actual war years. The Focke-Wulf FA-330 was a German rotor kite towed behind submarines for scouting. The U.S. captured and tested these to see if spies could be towed behind moving ships. It proved that unpowered rotors could generate significant lift when moved through the air. While simple, it was a terrifying way to fly, suspended by nothing but a thin cable. The Benson X-25 was an ejection seat helicopter designed for downed pilots to escape. The idea was to eject, unfold a tiny rotor, and fly yourself back to a friendly base. The Air Force realized it was insane to expect a pilot to build a helicopter while falling. The project was abandoned, but the flying seat remains a peak of experimental madness. We end with the PD-100 Black Hornet, a nano helicopter used by Marines in the field today. It is smaller than a human hand and flies silently into buildings to send back live video. From the 130-foot monster to this tiny, toy-sized drone, the journey of flight is complete. The American rotary wing fleet continues to evolve, proving that the sky is just the beginning.